All right, well today is August 21st. This video is just a tick later than what I normally would have thought about doing. But today we're going to discuss scouting double crop soybeans for podworms. It's a bit windy. We've got the remnants of tropical systems and low pressure systems moving off the coast, so I apologize if the wind noise comes through. Corn earworm is our greatest double crop soybean threat in southern Delaware. Occasionally it gets its way up into Dover south. But today, first we're going to start by looking at this blacklight trap. So this is one of about a dozen locations that we trap for corn earworm populations. Typically by the end of July, early August, our earworm flight starts picking up. And about 1 to 2 weeks after that, we start getting podworms in double crop soybeans. So let's take a look at this trap. It's rained a couple of days, so it's a little gross. All right, we're going to dump this out. We've got a lot of green stink bugs in here. Green stink bugs are also a big threat for double crop soybeans statewide. They tend to finish their first generation in full season beans, and then by the time the double crop beans are maturing or at R4, R5, R6, those stink bugs are leaving full season beans and moving into double crops. So they can sometimes pile up in the double crops. All right, so we're going to count the green stink bugs here in just a sec. We don't have specific scouting recommendations or thresholds for greens, but we do for earworms. So there's one earworm. It's been beat up by the rain and all the other insects that have gotten into this trap. There's 2, 3, I don't think, no, that one was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so Ben and I just finished poking through here. A couple of insects that I want to point out. We had about 140-ish corn earworm. I think 140 will be my final guesstimate. A lot of these malls are really beat up, and so it takes a little bit of divining to say that is an earworm or, you know, this sorry looking thing. A couple of other cool bugs. This is one of our large click beetle species. That's just cool. Let's see. Let's take a look at some other neat ones. There's one that I just passed that is relevant for soybeans. Where'd it go? There it is. This is striped blister beetle. You want to be really careful handling these because they will give you blisters if you crush them. They will feed on soybean blossoms, but they're more of a potential hay and pasture grass threat if they get incorporated into hay. Let's see here. Other cool things. Got one lousy European hornet. Get rid of those. We don't like them. This is one of our largest beetles in the state. This is a water scavenger beetle. These things are really cool. Good to throw in fish tanks. They'll help keep the fish tank clean. We've got a whole bunch of ground beetles, and then whatever this thing is, these little red and black beetles, these are rove beetles. They're scavengers, and they're resistant to the kill strip that we put in these traps, or at least partially resistant to it. If there's going to be an insect that survives a blacklight trap, it's going to be those. Fortunately, it looks like we've got a whole bunch of ground beetles that survived. They might recover from the insecticide. There's a whole bunch that are poisoned. We did have a couple of soybean loopers in the trap. I've since lost them. This here's a mole cricket. We get a few of these in the blacklight traps every year, not many, but I get more complaints about these things or wireworms or somebody knocking holes in drip tape in vegetables. So that's what the adult mole cricket looks like. Pretty neat thing. If there is ever a way for a student to make an insect collection, or if you know of any kids that are going into college taking a class that requires an insect collection, let me know. We can save them blacklight trap contents. This here is a horsefly, one of the big ones. Be careful with those, they will bite like the dickens. Ben, how many green stink bugs did we have in this trap?
27.
27 greens. That's sounds like a lot, but really it's not. The years that we tend to have more widespread issues with green stink bugs, we'll catch well over 100 per night, not 8 or 9 a night. All right, let's go into some soybeans. So this area here, I'm picking on this trap in particular. We've had a very high earworm trap capture from this blacklight trap the last 2 weeks and from some pheromone traps really close by. We're talking, anywhere from 15 to 30 to 40 moths a night in the blacklight and anywhere from 40 to 60 moths a night in the pheromone trap. That puts double crop soybeans at great risk, as well as other vegetables. Sweet corn obviously should be on a very tight spray schedule, 2 to 3 days. Tomatoes, peppers, snap beans, lima beans are all at risk from earworm. So we're going to go into some soybeans here in just a sec. All right, so now we're in another soybean field. This one is not quite what I would consider an at-risk double crop soybean field. We are at the very beginning of R4, where we have full-size pods in the upper 4 nodes, or at least they're long. So we're past the beginning of pod, where those pods are going to be about this size. The plants are about done flowering. Soybeans that are flowering are going to be at greater risk. They're more attractive to earworms, flying in to fuel up on the nectar from the flowers and then sprinkle eggs across the field. However, we are very close to where we pulled out that enormous blacklight trap catch. So we're going to do a couple sweeps in here and see what we get. Also, while I'm going across this field, we've got some more defoliation in here than what we saw in some of our earlier soybean fields earlier this season. It's still, we still have closed canopies and good foliage. I'm not worried about the defoliators right now. Sweep net is passing all the way through the canopy. These are 15-inch beans, so we're passing through 3 rows. And that plays an important role when it comes to looking at our earworm thresholds, which we will discuss in just a moment on North Carolina State's earworm threshold calculator. All right, there's a green clover worm. General defoliator, there's a lot of things that like to eat them. I think of them as somewhat beneficial, actually. This here, we'll see some more of this at the research station. These are soybean aphids. This year we've had a lot of soybean aphid activity. A lot of fields have been sprayed and probably should have been sprayed for them. This field has a lot of them starting up. A lot of young ones in there. This here is a lacewing. They're going to eat soybean aphids. They're beneficials. Got some grasshopper activity. Some insects that in soybeans, these are tarnished plant bugs. In soybeans, they're irrelevant, but they are important pests in early lima beans. This here is either a soybean looper or a cabbage looper. Most people associate cabbage loopers with being green and soybean loopers with having black legs, but the truth of the matter is both species can look the same. You got to pull the mandibles apart. Yeah, a fair number of soybean aphids on these leaves. Threshold is 250 per plant average before R5. There's also a decent number of natural enemies in here. There's a minute pirate bug. We'll probably see some ladybug activity in this field soon. So as long as we don't well, actually I was going to, so we got a decent number of natural enemies in this field. There's a minute pirate bug. That's a good thing. No earworms in that sweep sample. Took another sweep sample a little bit ago, so we'll go through that one. There's a soybean looper right there. And a ladybug larva chowing down on our aphid friends. Green stink bug. Threshold is 5 and 15 sweeps. Here's a big green clover worm. Corn earworm also has a green color morph too. So you got to look at the prolegs. Green clover worms have 3 pairs of abdominal prolegs right there. And they'll have a slight arch in their walking. Corn earworm has 4 prolegs and doesn't have that pronounced arch. Here's a bean leaf beetle, and this, well, just went flying by, is a 3-corner alfalfa hopper. Thresholds for bean leaf beetles are pretty high. Their populations peak in September. And if you want to know more about those, offhand, I would say read the weekly crop update, because offhand, I don't remember what the thresholds are in September. Always got a review. Womp, womp, womp. I know I had an earworm in this net. Ah, there we go. All right, so we've got some more green cloverworm, some soybean looper, but this here is what we're interested in. This is an early instar, second instar corn earworm. They're going to have this kind of bluish, orangish, sometimes a translucent orange color to them. They'll look bristly. That's what we want to find in our nets. We don't want to find a big caterpillar in our net. We want to find the little ones. The little ones mean we're on time. So, let's go take a look at the threshold calculator to figure out what we want to do, when we want to do it, and manage those earworms. The good news is with earworms, the diamides at their very low rates are very effective in soybeans. And one of the more common materials here is besiege. It's kind of expensive, about $2.50 an ounce, and it goes out at between 5.5 and 10 ounces. Those low rates do a good job. The nice thing is that low rate of the pyrethroid in that besiege will also take out our soybean aphids. So the field we were just at turned out to have a pretty low average of corn earworm. It's still a field worth keeping an eye on next week as those worms get a little bit bigger, see if there's another flush of eggs hatching. This field here is at a greater risk for earworm. So the field we were at, I put at a moderate risk because it was already at full pod and very few flowers left on the plants. This field is at R2 to, we're starting to hit R3. We've got some small pods starting up there, 4 nodes down. And we've got an experiment in here where we're going to treat this field prophylactically, so we'll probably be treating this again next week. But so we still have a lot of blossoms in the field. The canopy is fairly open, especially in this front piece where deer have been feeding heavily. So we're going to sweep it. I also want to point out something that's very, very unusual, but seems to be fairly widespread but sporadic across the region this year. This is all soybean aphid. Threshold for soybean aphid is 250 aphids per plant on average prior to R5. This was developed out in the Midwest. For us, it's extremely rare to have soybean aphids blow up in any significant number. This field is loaded with them. So we might consider a treatment regardless of earworm on this field. But let's take some sweeps and take a look and see what we've got earworm wise. we have ourselves some green clover worms and soybean looper. You can see we've got a decent, oh, this is a nice infestation of soybean aphids. These leaves are cupped. They're covered in the white cast skins from young aphids molting. They've got this sooty mold growing on them. If it didn't rain yesterday, those plants would be glistening. Here we go, here's an earworm. So there's one. Aphids, 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 more aphids. Good thing is, in our area at least, these aphids are easy to kill. We dropped a aphid spray trial on these last week. And all of our pyrethroids and safina wiped the snot out of our aphids. There's another earworm. Once they get to that size, they will probably survive. Small earworms can get killed off by quite a few natural enemies, but once they get about that size, they're probably around for good. There's a third earworm. Now this is not an earworm. This is a webworm that's feeding on pigweed. They've got too many spots to be earworm. If you end up with a lot of leaves in your net, you're hitting those beans with authority and hard enough to knock insects in the net. If you sweep and don't have anything in your net, you might want to sweep a little harder. All right, there's a fourth earworm. And a fifth. So let's go take a look at the soybean threshold calculator to see what we need to do about this field. All right, so we're going to take a look at the NCSU Corn Earworm Threshold Calculator. So we're going to Google search NCSU Corn Earworm Calculator. Corn Earworm Economic Threshold Calculator. Let's click on this link. And here we have the calculator to estimate the economic injury level in soybeans. So we're going to use a sweep net, and their only options are for 7 and 21 inches, though I use a sweep net for 30 as well. Price of beans, let's put in $10.15. Row spacing, it's pretty common in double crops to be on 7 or 14 inch. I'm going to put in 14 inch or 15 inch is probably even more common. And the cost of control. So this is product plus the application cost. I'm going to use a $10 application cost, and then let's say a cheap pyrethroid might be $2, maybe $3. So let's just put in $13 for the fun of it, and let's see what happens. All right. So now we see that our economic injury level is 1.9 caterpillars per 15 sweep sample. The problem with this, though, is that those cheap pyrethroids are inconsistent. We do have pyrethroid resistance. I have had them work in spray trials. I've also had spray trials where they didn't work. And I have seen plenty of pictures from crop consultants with a sweep net full of earworms saying, we sprayed this field with pick a pyrethroid 5 days ago, and we still have these worms. And they're getting large and drilling into pods. So the next best options are going to be your diamides or lanate or denim or intrepid edge. Those are all getting expensive. Besiege is a pretty common one in our area, and it's probably right around $2 to $2.50 an ounce, with a rate range around 5.5 to 10 ounces, like 5.6. So let's say we go with the low range, the low rate. that has worked extremely well in the last several years of spray trials. So I'm pretty comfortable with that rate. Let's just, again, for argument's sake, say 6 ounces. And let's just say, for argument's sake, $2.50 an ounce. We're going to come up with now our control cost is closer to $24. Let's just see what happens here. And update. Now we're looking at 3.5 caterpillars for 15 sweeps. So what this tells me is that if your earworm threshold, if your earworm counts are in the 2 to 3 per 15 sweep range, technically it's below the economic threshold for a product as expensive as Besiege, but you will get rid of all those caterpillars, as opposed to using a pyrethroid in which you might not get rid of enough. Let's say we have a field that's like what we just had, 5 earworms in 15 sweeps. We are over threshold. We're over threshold for Besiege. We are more than twice the threshold for a pyrethroid. Let's say we spray pyrethroid, we get an 80% kill, life is good. But what happens if you only get a 40% kill? And I've had spray trials in which that has happened. Now we're still over that pyrethroid threshold. We might even still be near the besiege threshold. And you either have to respray or you stand to potentially lose that amount's worth of beans, a good $24 worth of beans. So, in my opinion, once you start getting above about 2.5, 3 earworms and 15 sweeps, just for the peace of mind, go out with something that we know will work on earworm. So that's how you use the earworm economic threshold calculator. These things are always going to change a little bit. Take a look at your numbers and your control costs. Another thing to consider, how are you going to apply that insecticide? Are you going across ground with a tractor? That's going to crush beans. That's a hidden control cost. Are you going to use sprayer tracks that you've already used previously in the season? You won't crush as many beans. So you can probably factor out the potential yield loss from just driving over soybeans. Are you going to use a spray plane? Once we get into, you know, fully canopied soybeans and it's a question of drive over them or not make that application, that's where I really like the idea of using a spray plane. So we don't have that hidden yield loss from driving over soybeans. If you've got a really big boom, you're not going to drive over nearly as many soybeans as if you only have a 30 foot boom, or in my case, a 10-foot backpack spray boom. So I hope that helps with the soybean calculator and considerations for managing podworm.